You know that moment when a game gets so much hype that you can't help but start wondering if you're missing out on something? Yeah, that was me with Arc Raiders. For months I'd seen clips, creators praising it, and people genuinely buzzing about it. And honestly, that kind of enthusiasm is contagious. So when the announcement for the Service Lamb dropped right before its full release on the 30th of October, it felt like the perfect excuse to jump in to see what the noise was all about. Now, I'll be honest, extraction shooters aren't exactly my bread and butter. The only one I'd really sunk any time into was DMZ from Modern Warfare 2's Warzone era. I dabbled in Hawked for a bit too, but that relationship ended quickly, thanks to the complete lack of skill-based matchmaking. So yeah, I came into Arc Raiders cautiously optimistic, hoping it wouldn't go down the same road. What really hooked me though was curiosity. I've always admired what Embark Studio pulled off with the finals. It's polished, fast, and still manages to feel fun almost 2 years later. So seeing them pivot from a competitive FPS to a third-person extraction shooter, that definitely piqued my interest. Could they really capture the same slick feel in a completely different genre? I wasn't necessarily expecting a sweaty, competitive grind, but I wasn't looking for a casual Sunday stroll either. What I wanted was something that struck a balance. Tense firefights, interesting loot mechanics, and some genuine moments of, oh no, that's a real player. And as someone who loves survival and FPS games, from crafting my way through Grounded to those nail-biting endgames on PUBG, Arc Raider felt like it might scratch the same itch. For this review, I played on PC via the Epic Store, since it went live there a little earlier than Steam for anyone who missed the earlier playtests. The full launch is rolling out across Xbox, PlayStation and PC, but my time was spent right there on the Rust Belt, scavenging, looting, dying, and occasionally pretending I knew what I was doing. So, the heart of Arc Raiders is pretty simple on paper. You drop into the Rust Belt, complete quests, scavenge what you can, and then try to extract before someone else decides they want your loot. It's the classic risk versus reward setup that keeps you on edge. That kind of tension where every noise makes you spin around because, let's be honest, you found high tier weapons and suddenly you've got something to lose. Each deployment lasts about 30 minutes, and as the clock ticks down, extraction points, or lifts, start disappearing. It's a clever design choice because it forces players together towards the end. I'm really curious to see how that tension evolves once the full player base settles in, especially if Embark introduces some sort of skill-based matchmaking, as I do wonder how welcoming that'll be for casual and new players long term. More on that later. Now, I'll admit, it took a while for the loop to click with me. Being fairly new to extraction shooters, I spent the first few runs hoarding everything, only to die 5 minutes later and lose the lot. There's a defined learning curve in figuring out what's worth looting, what's junk, and when to just extract. The balance between greed and survival becomes the game's real hook, and the moment you finally extract with decent gear, with seconds to spare, it's an absolute adrenaline rush. That said, after about 8 hours of the Service Lamb, the loop did start to feel a little samey. With only one map available, I can't be too harsh. It's more a symptom of limited content during the beta than bad design. The quests help break things up a bit, giving you short-term goals and a sense of progress. But early on, the quests didn't exactly grab me. It felt more like ticking off a to-do list than diving into meaningful missions. Still, I imagine that'll flesh out once the full release rolls around, especially with new areas and story threads coming into play. Personally, I found the real fun wasn't in the looting. It was those unpredictable encounters with other players. Those, do I shoot first or try to talk my way out of this moments, that end in complete chaos are what kept me playing. The looting might have felt a bit hollow, but the gunfights were satisfying. Progression in Arc Raiders is all about risk management, and your ability to not immediately lose everything you've just worked for. When things go well and you manage to exfil with a good haul, there's a sense of real progress. You can feel your stash slowly building up, enabling you to improve your gear and your confidence growing with each successful run. But on the flip side, get a bad few deployments in a row, and suddenly you're rummaging through your inventory like, right, I guess I'm taking this pea shooter and a dream. That constant cycle of building yourself up, losing it all, and clawing your way back that makes every round feel like its own mini-story. But that cycle does wane after a while. Even in this open beta, the progression loop gives you something to chase. Completing quests do reward you with better gear and EXP. And for anyone who enjoys looking good while getting shot at, the cosmetic rewards are genuinely impressive. The outfits and gear design fit the world perfectly. And while cosmetics are obviously optional, they do add personal flair that keeps your character feeling yours. Personally, I've got no problem admitting I'll happily grind an extra hour if it means my character looks 10% cooler during their next inevitable death. What Arc Raiders really nails though is the balance between effort and reward. Every item you pull out of the Rust Belt feels earned. The enemies, even the small drones, hit hard enough to make you think twice before rushing in. So surviving a firefight and making it to extraction feels like a genuine achievement. It's the kind of satisfaction that only comes from knowing how close you were to losing everything. Of course, that sword cuts both ways. There's nothing more soul-crushing than watching hours of progress disappear because another squad ambush you right before exfil. But honestly, that's part of the thrill. That razor-thin line between victory and complete loss is what gives the extraction shooter genre its adrenaline kick, and Arc Raiders captures that perfectly. Even when you've had a few bad runs, not all is lost. You're still earning XP based on looting, completing objectives, and taking down drones. That means you're continuously moving forward and improving your character over time. You can invest those points into skill trees to unlock practical upgrades, maybe increasing your loot speed, making less noise while breaching, or otherwise tweaking your playstyle. It gives a satisfying sense of growth, even when luck isn't on your side. When it comes to how Arc Raiders actually plays, Embark Studio really shows their pedigree here. The core mechanics just feel right. Movement has this grounded, weighty feel that gives every sense of realism, and the gunplay is spot on. Every shot feels purposeful, every reload has impact, and that satisfying pop when you break someone's shield. The minimalist HUD keeps the screen clean and helps with immersion. No hit markers flashing all over the place, but you still get subtle visual feedback for things like body shots, which keeps combat feeling tactile and responsive. That said, once you leave the battlefield and start poking around the menus, things get a little messy when navigating your stash, crafting tables, and vendors. It's not bad, but it definitely could use some tightening up. Early on, I had no clue what I should recycle, sell, or actually keep, and I'm sure I scrapped some valuable things out of pure ignorance. A few clearer tutorials or tips wouldn't go amiss, especially for newcomers to the genre. On the flip side, I love how seamlessly you can jump between crafting menus and your inventory. That's genuinely a clever design, especially when you're breaking something down for parts mid-session. I'd love to see a small quality of life tweak, like being able to preview what materials you'll get from dismantling an item without having to inspect it every single time. Little things like that would smooth the whole experience out nicely. Beneath that though, there's definitely some depth here for players who want to really dig in. In the full release, you'll have multiple workbenches to unlock and level up, giving access to better equipment, upgrades, and crafting recipes. The more you play, the more you'll start to understand what loot actually matters, and what's there to fill your bags before you inevitably lose it all. In terms of strategy, Arc Raiders leans more towards strategic resource management than wild creativity. It's all about making smart calls, what to craft, what to sell, and which areas to risk for higher tier loot. There's a rhythm to it that I can see appealing to players who enjoy planning their loadouts and optimizing their runs. As for what makes it stand out mechanically, honestly, there's nothing drastically new here. It follows the familiar extraction shooter formula: loot, fight, survive, extract. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Embark clearly focused on refining what works rather than reinventing it, and the result is a system that feels polished where it matters most. If there's one area where Arc Raider truly flexes, it's the world design. Even though the open beta only gave us access to a single map, the damn battlegrounds, it's honestly one of the most impressive environments I've played in a long time. The sheer diversity packed into one area is incredible. Spawn on one side and you're creeping through woodlands and overgrown swamps. Spawn on the other, and suddenly you're in a high-tech industrial zone straight out of a dystopian sci-fi movie. It feels like two completely different worlds stitched together, and yet it all flows naturally. This, for me, is where Arc Raiders absolutely shines. Every landmark and point of interest feels handcrafted with intent. Whether you're sneaking through the damp, echoing tunnels of the research admin building, or ducking between rusted containers in the power generation complex, each zone offers a fresh, tactical challenge. The map design doesn't just look good, it plays well. You'll have long sightlines for range fights, claustrophobic corners for close quarters chaos, and plenty of elevation to make ambushes interesting. It's the kind of map where you start developing favourites, not because they're easier, but because they lead to the most memorable encounters. Visually, Arc Raiders nails immersion. The lighting, the weather effects, the environmental detail, it all comes together beautifully. The first time it started raining, I genuinely had to stop and take in the moment. The rain changes the whole mood of the run. It muffles footsteps, adds a sense of unease, and makes the whole world feel alive. The lighting system deserves its own shout out too. Stepping out from a dark corridor into the open daylight, and your eyes take a moment to adjust. It's a small thing, but it makes a huge difference. It sells the realism and keeps you grounded in the world. That said, there were a few spots that might have been too dark. We had a firefight in one of the indoor sections. It was the research admin building. There were moments I couldn't see a thing down certain hallways. I'm pretty sure that's intentional to encourage the use of flashlights. But still, the art style itself feels like it'll hold up for years. It's got a clean, industrial sci-fi look, detailed but not overly cluttered. And there's a strong sense of identity to it. It's gritty and grounded, but still looks distinctly Embark. Even if the gameplay loop evolves over time, I can't imagine the visuals aging poorly. If anything, this would be one of those games you revisit a few years down the line and still think, damn, that looks good. If the visuals are Arc Raiders' greatest strength, then audio comes as a very close second. It's one of those games where you can almost feel the world through the sound design. From the gentle patter of the rain hitting metal to the echo of distant gunfire bouncing around the map. The audio work here does so much of the heavy lifting when it comes to immersion. It's not just background noise, it's an active part of how you experience each deployment. The rain in particular deserves some love. It's not just a visual effect, it completely changes the atmosphere. When the storm rolls in, the world sounds heavier and denser. Gunfire echoes differently, footsteps get drowned out, and you start second guessing what you're hearing. It's brilliant environmental storytelling through sound alone. Weapons also sound fantastic. Even the lower tier guns, while a bit underwhelming in punch, still have a satisfying mechanical feel to them. The higher end gear though, every shot has weight. There's a crispness to the sound that sells the impact, especially when you break through someone's shield and get that beautifully static charged EMP pop. It's small touches like this that make combat in Arc Raiders feel genuinely satisfying. The environmental sounds are equally impressive, wading through muddy water, crunching over gravel, or creeping across creaky metal catwalks. It all adds to the tension. The game nails that sense of physicality, where every single surface tells you something about your surroundings. It's subtle, but it builds immersion better than any overblown soundtrack could. My only real gripe with the audio was the ziplines. They're way too quiet. I was down at the top of one in the research and admin building and never heard the enemy coming up behind us, which, in a game where situational awareness is everything, is pretty frustrating. That's the kind of sound cue that should be unmistakable. A creaking cable, a mechanical whir, anything to warn you that someone is on the way. Hopefully that's something Embark tightens up on full release, because otherwise, the audio sound design here is genuinely top tier. So, the main purpose of the open beta was pretty clear. Stress test the servers ahead of the launch later this month, and honestly, they held up impressively well. Looking at Steam's numbers, the player count peaked at just under 190,000 during the time I was on, and despite that, it felt incredibly smooth overall. Across 7 or 8 hours of play, I only had one noticeable hiccup, some rubber banding right as we first dropped in, and that was it. No random disconnects, no lag spikes, just solid performance. Now I did see reports of players running older Nvidia GPUs who were having a rougher time, crashes even after updating to the latest drivers that specifically mentioned Arc Raiders in the patch notes. Personally, I'm running an AMD setup, and I didn't have a single crash or performance dip. The game looked great and ran fantastically well. That said, I do have a couple of nitpicks. The foliage, it just looked off. When you're hiding inside of bush or a tree line, it feels flat. It's a minor visual blemish, but when everything else looks this good, it stands out. The other issue, and this one actually got me killed, was a bug with the ziplines. I couldn't detach and ended up yo-yoing back and forth until someone finished me off. I've seen that one reported elsewhere, so hopefully it's patched quickly. It's the kind of thing that stings extra hard in an extraction shooter where dying can mean losing valuable gear. In terms of platform performance, I only tested on PC through Epic Game Store and had zero issues there, but I'd love to hear how it played for you, especially if you're on console. So drop your experience in the comments. And also, I'd like to take this moment to ask, if you're enjoying this review so far, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to help find your way back for future reviews. Thank you. One gripe I do have though, is the update management. Midway through the beta on Friday, I jumped in, and after only a few runs, there was a notification that a full game re-download was required. That's not a small hotfix. For those with fast internet, sure, it's just an inconvenience. But for anyone with slower speeds or data caps, that's a deal breaker. It's wasteful and honestly unnecessary. Aside from that, Arc Raiders ran beautifully. The beta gave me a lot of confidence for the launch. Smooth frame rates, minimal lag, and stable service throughout. Performance never got in the way of the fun, which, for a game this chaotic and fast-paced, is saying something. I mentioned this at the start of the video, but it really needs repeating. The Arc Raiders community has been surprisingly wholesome. Everyone seems genuinely excited about the game. Not in the overhyped, forced kind of way, but in a this could be special kind of way. The vibe on the Discord and social media has been reminiscent of why I fell in love with gaming in the first place. People planning all-nighters, saying things like, I'm going to grind it all weekend and just vibe together. For a beta, that kind of energy is refreshing. Now, as much as I love a challenge, I think Arc Raiders would be tough to enjoy solo. You can use the squad feel option, but the game's built around coordinated teams. Going up against a solid trio on your own would be brutal. Luckily, teaming up is easy though. The Embark ID system works well, and matchmaking felt smooth throughout my time with it. The dev team, credit where is due, have done a great job staying open and communicative. There's a lot of developer presence in the Discord, real conversations happening, and regular blog updates on their site that actually tell you something meaningful. It's the kind of transparency we don't often get these days, and it helps build a bit of trust going forward into the launch. Now, in terms of longevity, that's a tricky one. This was my first proper dip into the world of extraction shooters, and while I had fun, I'm not sure it's something that I'll personally stick with long term. I tend to judge a game by how long it lingers after I log off. Do I think about my next run, how to improve, or how I got outplayed? With Arc Raiders, I didn't quite get the same pull. Once I stepped away, the urge to jump back in just wasn't there. There's definitely some variety here, and the visuals will keep things feeling fresh across different maps when the full release hits. But the core loop, loot, extract, repeat, starts to feel repetitive pretty quickly. The story didn't hook me, and while the gunplay is excellent and the visuals are stunning, it's not enough to carry the repetition on its own. In terms of value though, I can't complain. Around £30 for the base game is more than fair, especially if you're already a fan of extraction shooters. Even if you're unsure, I'd say keep an eye out for a free weekend. I'm sure they'll do one eventually. Aesthetically, Arc Raiders nails it. The visuals and sound design are phenomenal, easily among the best in the genre. But after the initial awe wears off, it's the gameplay loop that needs to do the heavy lifting, and right now, it's a bit too familiar. Would I recommend it? If you love extraction shooters, absolutely yes. Dive in at launch and you'll probably have a great time. But if you're on the fence or prefer more progression-based games, you might want to wait and see how it evolves. My biggest concern is the long-term player balance. Without proper skill-based matchmaking, new or casual players could get stomped by well-geared veterans within weeks, and that's how the player base will dry out fast. We've seen it before. I played Hawked briefly and ran into the same issue, constantly getting matched against higher tier teams who were killing for fun. Arc Raiders needs to learn from that if it wants to build strong staying power. That said, I'm glad I got in early. It's been fun experiencing the game at this stage and seeing what Embark is building. There's potential here, a lot of it, but how they nurture the community and handle the matchmaking will determine whether Arc Raiders becomes a staple or just another short-lived experiment in the extraction genre. So what struck me the most after wrapping up my time with Arc Raiders? Honestly, it's how beautiful the Rust Belt is. I still can't get over how incredible the game looks. The level of detail, the weather systems, the atmosphere. It all comes together to make every single run feel different. And I have no doubt that when the full release drops with more maps, they'll be just as impressive. But that's kind of where the positives end for me. This was my first proper extraction shooter, and while I totally understand why people get a buzz from pulling off the perfect exfil with high tier loot, that loop just doesn't click for me. I didn't feel connected to the quests or the story. They never really pulled me in. And even though the crafting system is fun, I think the UI could use a few tweaks to make it feel smoother to navigate. There's been a lot of hype around Arc Raiders, and part of me came away wondering what I was missing. The open beta didn't quite convince me to buy the full game. If you're already into extraction shooters, I think you'll probably get a lot more out of it. But if you're new to the genre like me, or on the fence, I'd say wait for a free weekend and give it a try before committing. And that brings me to my personal rating. I'm going to give Arc Raiders the rating of quick session. It's a game I enjoyed dipping into, but not one I see myself sticking with long term. The visuals are absolutely top tier, and the sound design backs it up perfectly. But for me, the gameplay loop just doesn't have enough pull to justify the full purchase. So that's where I leave it. If you love Arc Raiders, I'd really love to hear why. Drop a comment below and tell me what makes it click for you. Maybe I'm missing something that you found. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this full review, give it a thumbs up and subscribe so you can find your way back for future reviews.